This is a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District PTSA.
So welcome everyone. My name is Tara Miner. I'm the PTSA secretary. Normally our president Sangeeta does the introductions, but since I know Leslie a little bit more than she does, I volunteered. I just know how busy Leslie is. I know that when you're around her, she just makes you want to be healthier. She encourages good, healthy habits, and I've seen what she's brought to like lacrosse, tournaments when she opens up her cooler, and I'm like, gosh, she's got everything like cut and organized. But so that's why I thought of her. And she is a registered dietitian. She lives in Brighton, and I'll take it over. Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So welcome everybody. I appreciate you coming today during lunch to talk about food. As Tara just mentioned, so I am a registered dietitian. I've held a myriad of positions kind of touching on everything from diabetes to outpatient general counseling. My passion is probably the ICU though. I love really talking with people who can't eat for themselves and how can we get disease-specific nutrients delivered to them to help with whatever is going on in their body, which is very different from today. So this is where I get to really kind of go back to at my education, but also to kind of give you some practical advice that hopefully you can go home and you can feed your children a little bit better, a little bit differently, maybe even just a tip for yourself as well. Before I kind of get started on the actual things I've prepared for you, I think the number one thing I have to kind of get right out there and say is there is so much you can cover with nutrition, so much that is entailed in an everyday feeding yourself, your family, including if you've got somebody you're feeding with allergies or who is incredibly picky. So I'm not going to be able to really dig into that kind of level today. I've got to keep it very general. However, if you do have any specific questions, feel free to come up to me at the end and we can talk about that then. But I thought it would be nice for me to know who is in the audience. So if you guys wouldn't mind raising your hands if you have a kid at Council Rock or primary school. Okay. How about French Road? TCMS? Okay, how about high school? Okay, so we got everybody. Awesome. Okay, that's great to know. Okay, so to kind of get things totally started, I thought I would boil it down to three main topics today. The first one is nutrition is not all or nothing. There's no ultimatums here. So get that out of your system right away. It's not all or nothing. Number two is going to be preparation. We're going to talk a lot today about how to prepare you and how to prepare your kids so that they're feeling good about what's going in their body. And then the third thing is going to be rephrasing food as fuel. That's it. That's all it is. Food is fuel for the body. And we need to kind of think about it that way to be able to really take that next step into getting our kids the nutrients they need. Okay, so let's start there. Let's go backwards. Let's start with food is fuel. To understand what food is and understand what fuel would be for the body, I think we need to talk about the macronutrients that are contained in food. So let's go with the big three: carbohydrate, fat, and protein. I'm sure you all know a little bit about each one, but let's kind of break it down and talk about what each macronutrient does in the body, why it's necessary. The first one is going to be carbohydrates, because that's the easiest. Carbohydrates, most people know, it's going to be sugar, it's going to be starches, it's going to be anything that's going to be a grain, a wheat, a fruit. Anything like that is going to fit in the carbohydrate bucket. Why do you need carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are the preferred fuel source for the body. So that's our quick energy. That is our preferred fuel source for the brain. It's also the category that we usually way overdo, right? Whether it's extra candy, whether it's extra slices of bread with your pasta, all of that, this tends to be the category we way overdo. So just two very different things. It's a preferred source of fuel for your body, quick energy, necessary for your brain, but it's also one we have to be careful of because we way overdo. Make sense? Okay. Next, I think I will go right into protein. Protein is going to be the building blocks for your lean body mass. What's lean body mass? Feel free to shout it out. Muscles, okay. Muscles, don't forget your organs. Lungs, heart, all of that is considered lean body mass when we're talking about protein being a necessity to build and maintain the lean body mass you have. In my role for work, we talk a lot about strength and functionality, and what that means to this kind of application or this kind of talk would be, if you don't have any strength, you don't have any muscle mass to support your own body, you now are having trouble getting out of the chair, walking up the stairs. Now let's put that into a kid's perspective. They don't have enough energy to get around the school. They might not have enough strength to try out for the sport they want to try out for. Stand on the risers in the chorus. All of those things leading back to making sure they have enough protein support to support the muscle mass they have and build muscle mass for their growing bodies. Just going to throw it out there. Does anybody know anyone who's been on a high protein diet recently? That's like the big thing right now. We've got keto, we got paleo, we got everything. We've got even, date myself a little, Atkins. Like, that was huge. Protein was huge. But what we really boiled down to is we found that a lot of people thought they were doing a high protein diet. Really, they were just eating a lot of high protein fats and thinking they were minimizing other categories. So we'll talk a little bit too about how do we get good protein sources in, and how much do you think you need? That's a perfect segue just to say, does anybody have any idea how much protein they need a day?
I've heard half of your weight.
It's a great start. It's a great start.
It could be a lot.
So there's a whole formula depending on what your age is, what sports you're into, what activities you're doing. Also, if you've got any kind of chronic condition, it adjusts your protein accordingly. A good rule of thumb for today's talk would be if we could try to get everybody, not your Council Rock kids, but any teenager and above, including you guys, at least 20 grams of protein per meal. Again, I'm going to try to make this super basic, boiled down. So yes, there are scenarios. If you've got kidney failure, we need to have a whole other conversation about protein. This is just your basic, let's get some basic guidelines started. How many people do you think they had 20 grams of protein for breakfast this morning? Did anybody have breakfast? How about, that's a better question, right? Okay, good. So we had breakfast. We got a couple people who said yes to protein. That's probably the number one challenge, I think, is to get kids to have breakfast and have them have a good breakfast that will actually fuel them to get them through the day. So why am I coming up with 20 grams of protein? Like, where did I come up with that? For a healthy teenager and adult, you need about 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per kilogram body weight. So you can do the math yourself if you want. But about a 150-pound person needs about 68 grams of protein a day. That's where I'm getting the 20 grams from. But I'm also getting it because for your body to function and be at its optimization as far as digesting protein and keeping those muscles strong that we were just talking about, 20 is the magic number. 20 is optimal protein synthesis within your body. And there's mounds of research to show that. Again, generally, 20 grams is what we're aiming for each one. If you are a weightlifter and you are a heavy into CrossFit and etc., we could be talking about a whole different ballgame. You might need double that amount. Your 300-pound weightlifter is going to be very different from that 150-pound person I was just talking about. But again, we need to start somewhere, and it's kind of a nice, easy way to remember. Try to get 20 grams at each meal. So how do you do that? How do you get protein in every meal? You got to read the label, right? You got to know what foods have protein in them. What's the first thing you guys think of when we're talking about protein? Meat. Meat's an easy one, right? We've got all sorts of meats. We've got red meats, we've got white meats, we've got fish as options, all great protein sources. We also have a lot of non-meat options. What might that be?
Tofu.
Oh, I like it. I heard nuts, I heard tofu.
Eggs.
Way to go. Eggs.
Yogurt.
Yes.
protein?
They have a small amount, but you know, the idea being that we've got lots of options. You can even do beans and rice, put that together. You've got a great protein source. So it doesn't have to be meat. However, meat tends to be the easiest way to get a lot in a little quantity, right? Has anyone thought, well, gee, what about my dinner time? I've got so-and-so I eat with that goes way over 20 grams of protein. Anyone think about that? Typical American has very little protein for breakfast, sometimes a moderate amount for lunch, not usually 20 grams, and then eats all of it at dinner. I just went out to a restaurant that served it's in Batavia.
Alex.
No, not Alex's, it's the other, a red Osier?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Osier?
Yeah.
Okay, and they serve the prime rib that is 60 ounces. You get a t-shirt if you eat it. I'm gonna go with yes, that's way more than 20 grams. And perhaps then it's a great segue to think about portion sizes too, which we'll get into in a little bit. Okay. Protein was a lot bigger of a quantity than carbohydrates because I guarantee that none of you have a problem figuring out what a carbohydrate is. But protein is a tricky one. Okay? Yeah. Am I right?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, the last one is going to be fat. You need fat. Fat is a concentrated energy source, and it is necessary for you to get fatty acids into your system because they carry your vitamins and minerals. Let me give you an example. Fat is what carries vitamin D to your body. Furthermore, those fatty acids are what get calcium transported to your bones and your teeth. Does anyone think, gee, I need fat because I need to get the vitamin D and the calcium in my body? We don't think like that. What we do think, hopefully you just heard that and you said, okay, well, last time I went general, I didn't think if I eat a piece of steak, I'm going to get calcium in my body. You thought, okay, I have to eat more than just a piece of steak because with that whole plate all works together to help get all the nutrients in my body. So if you're having the glass of milk with it, or you're having some spinach with it, spinach is like one of the best carriers of all your nutrients and kind of combination of all those foods together to get them in your body and absorbed. Combinations, getting all of that stuff we just talked about, carbohydrates, protein, and fat all on the same plate is the only way our body works, the way it's meant to absorb all of our nutrients. What are some healthy fats versus not healthy fats? I think those are pretty clear. Avocado was mentioned before. Nuts, olive oil, all of those things are wonderful healthy fats. Some bad ones would be, well, gee, if you're gonna go ahead and dip everything in the deep fryer with soybean oil, that's probably not the best choice. Getting candy bars with saturated fat in it, probably not the best choice for fat. Doesn't mean it's off limits, but there are good and bad fats, and we need to be conscious of how much of the not healthy fats we're putting in our body. Okay? We've covered all of the macronutrient, just basics. How do you feel about that? Review, hopefully. Maybe you learned something interesting. Okay. Only extra piece about macronutrients that I think is important to note is the food label. The new food label came out, started in 2020, although some companies adopted it before then. But the new food label specifically calls out your fat, your carbohydrate, and your protein, like the old one, but it has extra things in there now. One of them being added sugars on the label. Has anyone noticed that? Yes, awesome. Okay, why is that important? We just talked about carbohydrates and what their benefits are, that they are that energy source we need. Do you think it matters, though, if it is inherently part of the food or if it's added? Especially when we're talking about kids. The number one thing we get as far as things we overdo is kids consuming added sugar. Using soda, Gatorade, Monster drinks, Frappuccinos. All of these things that perhaps are addition to what they're normally consuming, but the added sugar is so high on the list that it's not necessary. Again, not forbidden, just not necessary to be part of their day-to-day. So we want to be a little bit more in tune to the fact that the label now has this stuff called out when we're looking at tips and tricks a little bit later down the presentation to talk about how do we choose then what's going to be best to go in my kid's lunchbox or to be that snack for after school. Okay?
I have a question about the new
Sure.
label. So it will give you the sugar content, the natural sugar content, in addition to the added sugar. So if you want the total amount of sugar, do you add those, or is it?
Great question. When the new food label came out, that was one of the things they were trying very hard to figure out how to lay it out so that there wasn't confusion. Do you add it or are they separate? Total carbohydrate is going to be the amount of carbohydrates that the whole serving has. Underneath it's going to be broken out into added sugar and fiber. There's not going to be any inherent sugar in there as far as on the label. That's going to be part of the total carbohydrate. So if the total carbohydrate says it's 30 grams of carbohydrate, and then underneath it says 18 grams of added sugar, you'll know that 18 of those 30 are added, the rest is already part of the product. Because an inherent sugar might be just simply that. It was wheat from the flour. It was the strawberries from, the sugar that's already found in the strawberries that was made, into the strawberry, I can't think of an example, granola bar, whatever it may be. It's part of the total package. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So the inherent sugars are less of a negative than, do you have
Absolutely.
to? You still have to pay
absolutely.
attention to it, but it seems to me if they're breaking down the label like that, they're more concerned with the added.
Absolutely. And I would say for the purpose of this type of nutrition overview, all we care about is the added sugar.
Okay.
Because if you are going to have grapes, for example, that's got a lot of sugar in it. But those are all natural sugars. So those are going to be ones that our body's going to utilize and
There's
absorb.
other nutrients in the grape.
Absolutely.
The apples have fiber and it just makes
Absolutely.
it a lot.
Absolutely. Added sugar is simply taking a bowl of sugar and scooping it in. That's what we're talking about, is eliminating the added stuff. For example, milk has sugar in it. It's part of the milk. It's not added sugar. No one put a teaspoon of milk in it, or excuse me, sugar in that milk. But it's added, it's part of that in there. We would never want to take the sugar out because that's what makes the milk all-encompassing, and that's what gives the carbohydrates we get benefit from the milk to use as energy. We just don't want to add any extra sugar whenever possible. Okay? That helpful?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Now that we've talked about macronutrients, I got to refer to my notes so I stay on task, guys. Now that we've referred to those, let's talk about a little bit about perspective. When we're talking about how are we going to approach this mammoth decision of nutrition? First and foremost, what you eat in front of your kids matters. Your example, your role model matters. Your discussion about food matters. This doesn't mean you have to be an expert in any of this. But if you are the person who is constantly talking about losing weight, cutting calories, etc., that will be what your kids develops as a relationship with food. Okay, so I have to use myself as an example because I think this is only fair. We love to go out to dinner for fancy things. We go to Solo Fest. The treat is we all get to go out to dinner. Like, love it. I have created in my house a relationship with celebrations and going out to dinner. I'm not suggesting that's unhealthy. But if all of your food items are correlated to an emotional response, positive or negative, you do have to think about what your relationship yourself is with food and how you're projecting that on your kids. I have 2 boys. I'm sure if I was standing up here with 2 girls, I might have a little bit more dialogue on this conversation. In fact, in 2 more years, I might be having a very different dialogue as they're full-on teenagers. Right now, they don't care if they wear anything but sweatpants to school. That may change too. But my public service announcement to you is, if you are constantly making food a negative or bad response in your house, your child is going to adopt those behaviors as well. Just like meal times are important. One of the very first classes we had as nutrition students in college was a class called Nutrition in the Life Cycle. And one of the things they talk about is if you do not sit together as a family at any point, I'm not talking 7 days a week because we can't, right, always? But if you do not sit at the table and be able to have a conversation while you're eating food, your child will learn what those behaviors are as non-healthy behaviors in the food and relationship to it not being fuel anymore. Okay, that was really complicated the way I just said that, so I'm going to try that again. Food is fuel. If we now all of a sudden have all negative things about it because we're trying to lose weight or we're on the latest fad diet, or we can't eat anything what our kids are eating, what are we telling our kids? We're not thinking that it's valuable for us to do, so why should they do it? Does that make sense? That was very complicated, sorry. That was supposed to be boiled down to just whatever you do, they're going to do, whether they do it in front of you or not. Just like I remember being, when the kids were really little, and me giving them raw fruits and vegetables and, you know, making sure everything had no extra additive, and then first thing I did was, didn't even taste it. Dumped my salt on it, put cheese on it. Why can't I have the cheese? Why can't I have the salt? Again, I didn't even know I was doing it. Had to rethink it. Whatever we're doing at home, our kids are visually taking in and also adopting. Particularly huge for the adolescent females. And if you have those, that's the #1 population to be seen and strong, and also in the eating disorder clinic for disturbed and distorted body image, and it usually starts at home. That was scary. I'm going to move past that. But I didn't feel like I need to say that, and I need to put that out there because what we do at home and how we feed ourselves really shows our kids how we take care of ourselves and how they feel they should also take care of themselves. Okay, so we talked a little bit about perception and kind of why we need to do this, but we need to also go back to that one of those first things I said too. This is not all or nothing. We have to meet in the middle somewhere. We have to pinch hit in the middle sometimes. If you can have a night where y'all can sit at the table, do it. If it can't happen, it can't happen. Meet in the middle somewhere. It's not all or nothing. Just try your best to pick the best choice for that evening. So that leads into preparation. Everything is about preparation. If you don't have it, you can't eat it. If there's no carrots in the house, no one's gonna eat carrots. If there's no protein source in the house, no one can eat protein. We all know that. We know what we buy in the grocery store and put in our fridge is what we have choices to eat. Likewise, it goes the same to preparation. If you have a bowl of M&Ms on the kitchen counter, when you walk by, you're gonna eat them, right? If you also had the same scenario, but it was a bowl of grapes, you're gonna walk by and eat the bowl of grapes, right? We don't. It's available. It's ready to go. We didn't have to do anything. So how does that translate to your day? Sometimes, on like Monday morning, I am peeling 5 pounds worth of carrots. Because that's when I had a moment when I was preparing lunch for the week. And I peeled all my carrots for the week and chopped them all up and put them in bags. Because that's the only way I know I can get carrots cut for the whole week. And I like variety. So I did carrots this week, peppers, tomatoes, and cucumbers. Sometimes I don't have time to do a whole week's worth. Sometimes I do 1 day's worth and the next day I do 2 days worth. Sometimes I'm making them the night before. Whatever I'm looking ahead, it's all about preparing for, if it's available, the kids will eat it. Same thing with fruit. I've looked ahead on my week sometimes and known I've got to cut and wash enough fruit for 3 days worth of lunches. Have you guys ever washed strawberries and raspberries and then stuck them in the refrigerator afterwards? They're totally mushy. But if you wash them and let them dry on a paper towel till they come to room temperature and they're dry, they last.
See, that's what I need to do.
There you go.
Okay, done for the day.
That's it. I'm telling you.
But if they're still wet when you put them in, they're gonna be mush. So I do that with strawberries, raspberries, same thing with grapes. They gotta be room temperature and they've gotta be dry. So you gotta have an hour or two to let them dry on paper towels. Again, that's all preparation. Same thing with like apples. If I wanna cut apples the night before, you guys are gonna think I'm crazy. I take a plastic bag and I be my own vacuum sealer. Seal it off, they don't turn brown.
Because they don't like the lemon on it.
My boys don't like the lemon juice on them either. You've got that option. What do we do for, again, vegetables are easy. You cut the carrots ahead, the celery, cucumbers, whatever your preference is, whatever your kids like. If your kids like celery, but they want to dip it in something, send them with something to dip. One thing that must have been 2 years ago, I got asked, and I was surprised to be asked this question in general. Dad asked me, I love salad, but I only love salad if we squirt like 2 pounds worth of ranch dressing on it. Should we skip the salad in our house altogether? Absolutely not. Vegetables are vegetables. We're getting fruit, or all of our vitamins are minerals, and we're getting all of those nutrients in. If dumping ranch on it is the only way you're gonna do it, do it. Because if you're not eating a salad, what are you putting in place? Probably more carbohydrates. And maybe next week you don't put the 2 pounds of dressing on it, you put 1.5 pounds on it. And maybe you can work your way to getting less dressing, but we still need the fruits and vegetables. And any way we can get those into our kids, and I'm stressing them because those tend to be the area that people say their kids don't eat, you have that option. What if you don't have time for any of those things I just said? I actually brought an example. Does anybody like apricots? This right here is no added sugar. This is just dried fruit. I can't say that for all the dried fruits. Pineapple's got, I think, like, that is sweetened before it's dried. You got options like this. You've got no sugar added applesauce that you could send your kids with. They like squeezy stuff, you've got squeezy stuff you can send your kids with. It doesn't all have to be, again, extreme. If you don't have time to chop all those carrots, they make little bags already done. They even make, Wegmans even makes apple bags. You've got all of the choices. Again, it has to fit within your timeline and also your budget too. I'm too cheap to buy those little pre-made things. But food is my life. So I will absolutely put that priority on so that I will be slicing carrots. I realize not everybody wants to do that. Along with preparation too, you have to remember that when we're talking about feeding that kid after school, you have to think about that before they go to school. Unless you have a time set out during the day that you can dedicate to preparing that meal for them in the evening, I don't have that time. I already know what I'm going to feed my kids for dinner before I've even left the house for work in the morning. Why? Because this year, or this time of year, we're in ski race season, which means we have to leave our house, or the kids have to leave the house at 4:45 Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights to get down to the mountain. So I might not be home and I might not be driving them, but they have to have dinner at 4:45. Who is thinking about dinner that early? But if I don't feed them dinner, they're not eating dinner till 9 o'clock when they get home. And what do you think they ate between lunchtime and 9 o'clock at night? Junk. So it's worth it for me to give it a little extra thought. We do a lot of stuff in the crock pot. Sometimes I have to cook something the night before. Last night I cooked sweet potatoes while I was home so that they could be microwaved for them today. It's prep. That's a lot of prep work, right? Because I thought sweet potatoes sounded yummy to go with the pork tonight. But I know I don't have time to cook them, so I had to do it the night before. So a lot of prep work accordingly. It also goes, well, how do you figure that out if you don't have an option to do that? You can always divide a meal out. You could do cold fruit, cold veggies, nuts, cheese stick maybe, for the ride down, and then when they get home, that pork and sweet potato when they got home. Divide it out. What you don't want to do is, I had edible cookie dough the whole way down, and then I had a full meal when I got home. Because that goes right into, we're not fueling the body. Whatever we're talking about, you need to be thinking preparation-wise, what am I fueling them for? Am I fueling them for an athletic activity? If so, we need some quick energy, the most natural form we can find. So that would be your fruits, your vegetables, your yogurts, your whole grain bread with peanut butter on it, those kind of things. And then we also need that protein source to withstand them, because protein is what lasts in our system and keeps us feeling full. Without those things, if we just provide simple sugars, we just give somebody a snack pack or a granola bar that's just carbohydrates, we are now ready for another meal in an hour and a half or an hour, and we're just carbohydrating. And when we carbohydrate, our blood sugar goes up, and then what happens? We crash. I can't have my kid crash at 6:30 in the middle of ski practice while he's running gates. I need him to be able to have the fuel to perform. Same thing with if my younger one is going to theater camp. He's on stage, lights are on him. You don't think, oh gosh, you're going to get that sweaty. He does get that sweaty. He's working that hard on his, his dance moves, etc. You think about that and you think, okay, I again need to make sure we've got enough carbohydrates for him for quick energy. He's got enough protein to last. And then furthermore, we haven't talked about hydration yet. Does anyone think their kid is adequately hydrated? Because mine are certainly not. It's hard, right? Summer, not as hard. Summer, everybody's thirsty. Winter, it's hard to get people to drink. It's hard to get kids to drink. So making sure that we're choosing beverages like what? Water. Oh, I like it. Water. Going back to my added sugar comment, what should we not be reaching for?
Soda.
It doesn't mean those things can't fit, right? It just means that should not be our preferred everyday item. When my kids were little, we had two phrases in our house: everyday foods and sometimes foods. That was like the kid term that I coined for them to understand. The everyday foods did not include soda. The sometimes foods did, for sure. But even so, when we're talking about those sometimes foods, no matter what they are, we've got to make sure that we don't have that huge increase in our blood sugar and then that crash afterwards. Which I think kind of goes right along with, so then what happens when you get home? My kid's hungry again when we get home. So if you're splitting the meal up and you're doing all the cold things and the things you can prepare ahead of time before and then you do the meal after, totally fine. Probably another good thing would be, if they want to have that extra treat, maybe pay attention to how big that quantity is. Last thing you want to do is have a king-size candy bar and then try to fall asleep. But planning out ahead of time like that too. So if you know your kid is like a total dessert fan, maybe give them the dessert at lunch so that you don't have to give it to them or they're not asking for it right before they go to bed. Again, along the lines of kind of fueling your body, if you have an athlete and you read any athletic magazine, they'll talk about carbohydrates and protein after a workout. One of the top things you can give a kid after an athletic performance is chocolate milk. Great carbohydrates, great protein source, and we get all the vitamins and minerals to support it. What if you got a kid that you're picking up late because they were in math team and they're going straight from there to violin practice? What do you do then? We're still fueling that body, so we need to think of ideas that they will consume that will give them a protein source and a good carbohydrate source. So let's talk about what those are, because this is where my display case comes in. When I asked my kids what I should be telling you guys suggestion-wise, they wanted me to pack a whole lunch and bring it and demonstrate it to you. I did not do that because I did not want to pack a third lunch this morning. But they did say they thought it was important for me to tell you all the best part about their lunches is there's one of everything in there. What does that mean? That means this morning was cucumbers and peppers, strawberries, a half a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because they don't want a whole this month. We adjust this daily here, regular. A cheese stick, a yogurt, and chocolate chip cookies. And chips. I forgot about chips. Everything was portioned though. Yeah, right, that seems like crazy. First, you also have to add an extra layer. My youngest son has been a tree hugger at Pres all these years, so everything has to be in a reusable container too. It's like a lot happened in there, except for apples. I have to suck the air out of those. The idea though is it's a little bit of everything. What do you do if you're like, gosh, my kid won't eat half those things? Well, you pick the things that they will eat and try to add something new regularly in. If you don't eat it, chances are they won't eat it. Likewise, if you give them all, I saw this the other day at a ski kid's lunchbox. They had a yogurt with the candy on top, the Nutella sticks, 2 bags of chips, and a fruit snack. Neither here nor there. Again, there's no bad foods. My point was, there wasn't another option for them to choose. It wasn't in their lunchbox to have the option to choose a protein source, because there wasn't a protein in there. So giving your kid the option, even if they don't eat it all the time, you want to have that option and that opportunity for your kid to choose the fuel that they need. If you gave me the choice as a 9-year-old kid to choose a candy bar or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I'd probably choose a candy bar too. That makes sense, right? That also said we don't want to waste food. So you don't want to send your kid with a lunchbox of stuff you know they're not going to eat and then watch it all come home or watch it go in the garbage. So we have a rule in our house that if you don't want what's in your lunchbox, just send it home so we know. And I'm not talking onesie-twosie. I'm not talking, hey, you didn't eat your sandwich today, I will not send you sandwiches anymore. But if it becomes a pattern, that every day the kid comes home with the vegetables, either maybe you gotta switch the vegetable up, or 2, you gotta have a conversation about, well, is there any reason you don't eat it? Do you not like it? Would you prefer something else? Maybe 2 fruits at lunch would be better. Kind of work with the kid on that. Obviously, the older they are, the easier it is to have that conversation. But you also have the opportunity to guide them in kind of where their choices could come from. Okay, so let's talk about yogurt. I brought a nice variety, but I'm going to show you what I'm talking about as far as options. Okay. There's always a good, better, best option for everything. Every category we're talking about, always a good, better, best. Good? Just a general Wegmans generic blended yogurt. Better choices, Greek yogurt. This one's got fruit you can add in. This is a less sugar option. Best option, non-fat Greek yogurt that you add your own fruit to. I'm sure you're all thinking in your mind right now, which one will my kid eat? My kid's not going to eat that. I will. I'd love that. My kid's not going to eat that. So what will my kid eat? And can I go over one more step? Why am I going good, better, best? Remember we talked about added sugars in the beginning? A good kind of way to compare something like yogurt is to take a look at those added sugars to know what's in there. Protein and added sugars, yogurt are your 2 big things. This one right here has 12 grams of added sugar. So is that a lot? That's kind of a lot of added sugar considering we already talked about dairy's already got sugar in it. But again, if your kid thinks this is awesome, then what are you getting? What are the benefits of eating something like yogurt? Protein, calcium, vitamin D, and then the other vitamins and minerals. And some of these have a lot of probiotics that are super helpful too. When we move down the way, this has got the jam, like I said, in the back. We're talking added sugars right here of 8 grams of added sugar. That's 4 grams less for a small serving. That's a nice decrease in added sugar. That's a win, right? We still get the sweetness. Let's go all the way down here for some added drama here. How many added sugar grams do you think are in this?
0.
0. 15 grams of protein though. Tremendous. Again, find your way and how can you meet in the middle? There's always going to be the good, better, and best options, and where will you fit on the radar? Because I'll tell you what, if this is the best option, no, scratch that. If Yo Crunch is the best option, which is a real small vanilla yogurt with the candy on top, and that's the one your kid will eat and they will not eat any of these because you've tried, I hope, then give them that. Because you're still getting the calcium, the protein, the vitamin D, you're getting all of that benefit. But because we have the candy on top, maybe they don't get the extra treat in their lunchbox. Maybe they don't get the extra 2 cookies. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Could you talk about, I pack my kids, when I pack them yogurt, whole milk yogurt. And I remembered you said something in the beginning when we were talking about proteins and fats, but here you were suggesting a 0% fat.
Yeah, so when you're talking about dairy products, the difference between whole fat versus no fat, there's this huge range and it's very individual on where you are in your stage of life. If you're talking about little kids, the idea being that as you grow, the moment or momentum to move you from whole fat to 2% to 1% to skim is simply fat removal from these products is a great move to make as an adult. There's a whole nother campsite though, particularly when we're talking about little kids, that whole fat milk is a wonderful way for them to get the extra calories and to sustain their hunger. There's been quite a bit of research that has shown that whole fat milk products actually tend to have kids eat less overall as they grow up because they don't overeat because they've got that extra fat to keep them satiated. So for development, absolutely 100% whole milk is a fantastic way. Whole milk, I think I have one in here. One of my other examples, I bought too many yogurts, I got too excited, is a whole fat version. That's a tremendous option for growth development as well as keeping your body satiated. Where it becomes a little bit tricky is when we're talking about that teenager who is having trouble, or we are concerned about them growing out more than they're growing up, and that we're looking for ways to decrease the overall calorie intake. Yogurt is one, or dairy is one area that things are not added in place of fat. So a lot of times when we're talking about products that are fat-free, like a dressing or like a cookie, something that we're pulling fat out of, we're substituting the fat for other ingredients, like extra carbs or more sugar to make it tasty. And dairy is one of those things that does not happen in. So if you're drinking whole fat milk versus skim milk, the fat's the only difference. There's not a difference in the vitamin mineral content or the protein content. That's actually a question I get asked more than not, because the whole milk says vitamin D on it, but none of the other ones do. It's just a habit that dairy farmers put that on there. They all have the same vitamin and mineral content. Not true when we're talking about other things like almond milk or silk, things like that. Those do vary, but to circle back around, whole fat yogurt is a great option. I was being selfish too because I get to eat these afterwards, and I don't want the extra calories.
I wanted to ask, what about kids that don't drink milk? Like my son won't drink cow milk, but he'll drink like almond milk.
Yeah. So in those scenarios too, we're talking about taking a look at the label to see and compare the protein content of them, because in each category, if it's almond milk, soy milk, there are different brands that'll have different quantities of protein, as well as all have different additions of the vitamin D and calcium, because those all have to be supplemented into the product if they don't drink milk, which is perfectly acceptable. The other thing too is, I mentioned the Yo Crunch earlier. Only reason I didn't buy that one is because when I was shopping with my son, I didn't know they only come in 4-packs, and we didn't want to eat 4 of them, so we didn't buy them. But my point is, when we're talking about good, better, best, what's the alternative option? If you're going to not put the yogurt in there, what would take its spot? Would they be going up for another bag of chips? Because I know that was one of the things you could do at French Road that my kid thought was amazing, is you could go buy a bag of chips or an ice cream. I would rather have my kid eat the Yo Crunch yogurt with cookies on top than taking that extra trip up to get the bag of chips with the ice cream sandwich. So you have to think in your mind, what is it going to replace? Also, is it realistic that my family will eat it? Because most of these non-fat Greek yogurts, or even the big tubs, you've got to serve, right? You've got to take a scoop out, you've got to put it in a container, and then you've got to slice up the fruit. If you're not willing to do that, then that's not a good option for you. You have to start small. Maybe one week you are willing to do it and you're willing to lay out all of your yogurts for the week. Maybe the next week you're not. So that's not all or nothing. Figure out what's going to work for you. Likewise, along the dairy line, I'll be remiss to not talk about cheese. Cheese gets a bad rap because it's high in fat, right? No added sugar, protein, calcium, vitamin D. Because of the fat though, in appropriate portion sizes, keeps you full. So this may be a great snack option as you're running between events too. I brought two very different snack options. This is a sharp cheddar square, and this is the traditional mozzarella stick. You've got lots of options, lots of different price points. It's a great option for you for snacking to get that protein, get the extra calcium, vitamin D in. You're getting the theme here. We're really concerned about muscle development as well as bone health. These are kind of nice, easy ways to get there.
And I don't know if you'll get to this, but you could have that for breakfast. Like you could have
Absolutely.
a dinner item for breakfast if your kid would eat that in the morning.
I have a friend who only eats vegetables and steak for breakfast. Breakfast foods, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're the only ones who have specified what goes where. It can be any food at any time of the day. The idea is did you have a protein source and a good carbohydrate source? And were those vitamins and minerals from your vegetables and fruit in there? And it doesn't have to all be at the same time. We can space it out, but that's what we're aiming for each one. I brought this as an example too. I've never bought these, but I hear they're really great. This is like the ultimate convenience food. It is a P3 portable protein pack. It's got ham, almonds, and cheddar in it. Now, I can be this has no artificial preservatives in here. And I only mention that because, again, when we're talking about good, better, best, we could go through the whole line of deli meat alone and talk about what are your best options. We could talk about sodium, we could talk about nitrates. Best option for a meat would be something left over from the night before that you've roasted yourself and you put on a sandwich or in a wrap. Second best would be for you to go to the deli and get it sliced there. Third best would be the one that you get in the back that's got a couple month shelf life. All good options when we're talking about getting good food in. What I don't want anyone to do is leave here or ever leave a nutrition thought process and say, I had to choose Oreos because I didn't know what else to pick because I thought that deli meat was bad for me. Or I thought I couldn't have cheese or ice cream. We get very extreme when we're talking about food. And again, realizing good protein source, we've got a good fat source. But can anyone see how small the portion size is? This is probably a healthy portion size. This would probably be in a snack form, perfectly acceptable for all of us to have as a snack. As far as feeling healthy, feeling full, feeling like we were satisfied. Even looking at some of these as an example though, for when you're preparing it yourself. I could cut a couple of cheese cubes and throw probably, like a dozen almonds in there? I could totally do that at home. You gotta have some place to keep it though, right? Everything on this table that I just showed you so far was refrigerated. One of the things that Tara and I talked about though was lunch boxes. Do your kids carry lunch boxes? Do they all have an insulated lunch box? I know a couple of my friends have those metal ones still. Well, retro, right? Like super fun. If you don't have a refrigerator, you really have to think sanitation and safety when you're talking about any of this. You gotta have some kind of insulated lunchbox and some kind of freezer pack to put in there. None of this is expensive, but just be conscious of that. If you've gotta have something that's gonna last all the way through school, and say you're not bringing your kid to that practice and they've gotta have it on them all day, make sure that you have some kind of insulated pouch to put it in with a cooler, or have them have the refrigerated stuff for lunch and save the other stuff for later, which leads you into the bars. How do you choose? Here's another guideline for you. There are so many options for bars out there. 10 grams or less of sugar and 7 grams or more of protein. That's a great guideline for you to look for a bar. It gives you an option so that you have a better balance of carbohydrates and protein. Now, does that say you can't have the other one? Absolutely you can have the other one, but if I brought a couple as an example, very popular granola bar, it has 1 gram of protein in it and 7 grams of sugar. So not a crazy amount of sugar. This is, in fact, I think Chewy's done a good job at reducing their added sugar in there. But this is going to be what for our body? Quick energy, right? It's not going to be something that's going to last with us or stay with us. That's another one that I really found interesting. Oh, these were like a couple years ago. These kind of bars became very popular because of the limited ingredients in there. So I thought this one would be a fun one to talk about too. This has got 12 grams of protein, 13 grams of sugar, but I want to call something out. 0 grams of added sugar. Does that matter? I think so. So I'm over my limit, but it's got 0 grams of added sugar because this is egg whites, almonds, cashews, and dates. Dates have sugar in them. They're made of, or they're inherent sugar in them. So knowing that these kind of options are out there, you do have to look at the label and see if there's added sugar, and does that change your mindset? I went a little crazy and I got a Quest bar too. Has anyone heard of this brand? This is very high in protein. This is really great for those athletes or those bodybuilders who are looking for high amount of proteins for recovery after workout. That said, when you're talking about something this high in protein, and we're talking about 1 sugar, we've got a lot of artificial stuff in here. And the only reason I mention that is because sometimes when you're talking about this, it can give you a little GI discomfort. Not the thing you want to try before you go into play practice, right? Give it a try at home first. Now I have a bunch of coworkers who swear by the cookies and the brownies of these that are high protein. Love them. My little tummy can't handle this. So, another one I brought, things like Luna bars. Again, options, and you guys can come take a peek at them. All of these different options all have a nice 10 gram or less of sugar, 7 gram or more of protein. Things that can be stuck in your bag for 5 days and it doesn't have to be refrigerated. Sometimes these options are necessary, right? And it's always nice to have. Always great to have something like this as opposed to a bag of Twizzlers, which I've seen. I brought one more example because I thought this was kind of a eye-catching, enticing one. I've seen this brand and I gravitate towards it. Like, this speaks to me. Made good, I mean, doesn't it? Doesn't it just make you feel like they've naturally come up with something that's fantastic and amazing for you? This has got 1 gram of protein and 6 grams of sugar. Not a whole lot of anything in there. Have you ever had them? They're good. They're good.
They're school safe because they're not.
Yes, and they're free of everything. They're free of everything. I think they're delicious. I gotta tell you what though, I'm still hungry after I ate them. So this may be in something else. Maybe this in my cheesesteak. A cheesesteak? Cheese stick. Maybe I have to complement it with something. Again, not all or nothing. This is like a fantastic little treat. It really is. I've had the chocolate nut ones. No, chocolate oatmeal ones too, that I really like. I read the label though, and I was like, there's not a whole lot of anything in here that's gonna give my kid fuel, but it is a much less ingredient list than some of the other things. So that's also where you gotta see where you fall in that mix. How are you feeling about the more ingredients on the list, the more extra stuff is in there? Obviously, the more natural, the less ingredient list we can do, the better. But again, it's not all or nothing. So if one day you're doing this and one day you're doing this, that's okay. You just want to be aware of what you're doing to see if you need to complement it with something else.
So you had brought some product, or had recommended some products in the back.
Oh,
Can
fantastic.
you touch on those briefly at before
Yes.
you leave?
I didn't even know if it was all back there. So we
Yes.
talked about what would be some good snacks and what would be some good treats that would be less than, or better choices. One of my favorite things, I think I've mentioned a couple times now, is nuts, trail mix. You want a little kid to eat trail mix? Get the one with M&Ms in it. Now, I tell you that, but if your baggie comes home with only the M&Ms missing, then that's not a good choice for your family. Right? Or you go in and you buy the regular trail mix and you take, I know you're gonna think I'm crazy, you take an M&M bag and you take 5 M&Ms out and you sprinkle the 5 M&Ms in so that there is an M&M in there but it's not overdoing it. That's a great option because nuts are a fantastic healthy fat and a great protein. Again, the reason why I chose the one with the nuts in it, or the M&Ms in it, is because we've got a meat in the middle so that your kid will actually consume it. It's like dessert and protein all together. You get the one with raisins in there, and now we've got some, technically a fruit, and we've got a good fiber source in there. Other things. We serve dessert every day in our lunch boxes. In my house we do. Small amount though. One of our favorite things these days is brownie brittle. Has anyone tried it? It is like light, it is tiny, it is that perfect chocolate crunch. I think the last one I got was the sea salt caramel. Everybody got dessert, we got minimal added sugar, we got minimal excess fat, but we all got a treat. So I think that's back there as well.
Tara's passing it around right now.
Awesome. Hummus. Does anyone do hummus?
Yeah.
Hummus comes in a lot of varieties. I think my favorite right now I'm on to is the lemon garlic Ithaca brand.
So good.
Oh my gosh, amazing. You can put your veggies in it. You can pack a container of it or get the, I'm also known to get the Wegmans individual containers. I can do carrots, cucumbers, and pita chips. I've covered my chip for my lunch, my vegetable, and it's the same hummus. Whatever they feel like today. Do they want to dip their chips in it or do they want to dip their veggies in it? Chickpeas are a wonderful protein source. I just snuck protein into my vegetables. Hummus is made out of chickpeas, yes. Sorry, should have said that.
Eat that.
Chickpeas. Who knew? My kid loved chickpeas. Council Rock. Little containers of chickpeas on the bar. I'd go to have lunch with him and he was getting his side of chickpeas and his side of carrots, just eating the chickpeas like right out of the can.
Excuse me.
I would have never thought to serve it to him for him to try it until that was an exposure at school. Again, so hummus, that was a big one. It's also another thing, maybe you don't want deli meat in your school lunch. Maybe your kid doesn't like peanut butter. How about a hummus wrap? Taking a wrap, spreading hummus on it, maybe like sprinkling a little cheddar cheese on it or lettuce, or you want some crunch, put some carrot sticks in there, roll it up. My husband likes to cut them like sushi to make it fun. Yes, he's 12 and he still loves to eat sushi that Dad makes out of hummus. But you can get fun and kind of creative with that, with, again, still getting a great protein source and some variety in there. I've got more for you. You've got lemon dill, you've got beet, you've got roasted garlic, roasted red pepper. Again, all healthy fat and also great protein sources. Dark chocolate sea salt almonds. I thought these kind of things were fantastic because what it does is it shows you portion sizes. If you sit down with an entire bag of something or an entire container of something, you will probably eat the whole thing or half of it, or until you feel uncomfortable. But if you put it in a container or serve yourself some of it in a bowl, then you're covered. We can't deny ourselves food, otherwise we will be miserable, but we can choose things that are a better option. So, dark chocolate covered almonds, do you think those are a better choice than a bag of Oreos? Yeah. Now, you gotta like them. Obviously, don't choose them if you don't think that they're delicious. But more often than not, we find these little nuggets of things that can give us the nutrients we need and still satisfy our cravings. So whenever we do that, we want to be able to take advantage of that opportunity.
Is the dark chocolate a better option than milk chocolate, or is it one of those best, better,
Yeah.
good?
Yeah. So dark chocolate is the best because it has less sugar in it and it's got more antioxidants in it. But I'll also tell you, red wine is good for that too. But yes, dark chocolate still has more antioxidant properties. That's why it is a better option.
Oh, okay. And less sugar?
It usually has less sugar because it is a more bitter flavor. But that's not to say that whatever products that you've got dark chocolate in, they have not added extra sugar, because that can also happen.
Well, I think he's more likely to eat the dark chocolate. That's so there's an example.
And then in that scenario, you go for it because you're still. I don't think Trader Joe's makes that version in a milk chocolate covered almond, but I'm sure someone does. Right?
Yeah.
I'm sure they do.
Real quick, can you give us some options for protein for breakfast besides eggs?
So, before a few minutes ago, Tara did suggest some options for dinner foods at breakfast. You can always do that, but I think you're thinking, like, what else can you do?
What else can you give them?
So there are a couple cereals that do have good protein sources in them. So if you think about a cereal that's going to have like even something like 5 grams of protein in it, and then you're adding a milk to it, you could easily get yourself up to over 10 grams. That could be a start. You also have any kind of these yogurt options. I know a lot of people have been having yogurt for breakfast with some fruit on it, or even taking, again, if you want to do preparation, they've got all of those different jars you can make now with yogurt and oatmeal, etc. Those are wonderful. Wonderful options for protein to get it over. Egg tends to be the go-to. I think quite a few people, though, are even thinking things like peanut butter on toast.
Yeah.
Because, something as simple as that and easy, or even on a bagel, gives you an opportunity to get those protein sources up there. I think when you think about eggs, don't just think about scrambled eggs either, because eggs can be in things, or they could be simply a hard-boiled egg. If anyone's into avocado toast, a hard-boiled egg with an egg on top. I tend not to think like that because that's not, I think scrambled eggs. And having scrambled eggs every day for breakfast sounds awful to me. Just because I don't like to eat the same thing every day. Not because I don't love scrambled eggs. But, kind of making some variety in there. But nuts are always an option. Again, peanut butter on toast, as well as you can even put things like tofu into things. Tofu is flavorless until it's marinated. So you really have an option to kind of, you can even add stuff like that into cereal. Yes?
I just recently came across the Kodiak line of foods. So there's like a pancake mix and it has added protein. And there's an oatmeal that has the little oatmeal packets that have the added protein. And
Did you try them? Give
Yes.
feedback? Did you like them? I've seen them in the store.
I got them for my daughter because she was a carbohydrate girl and it was hard to get protein in her in the morning. We also did cheese in the morning. That's another one you can sneak in and get at least a little bit of protein, like little cheese cubes and stuff. That was what I used to, or the peanut butter on her banana. But then I found these, and so there's even little individual cup ones. We tried those first just to see if she even liked them. So it was, you just pour in either milk or water and you microwaved it, and then it made this kind of muffiny type thing.
Awesome.
And we just realized we can use the bigger pancake mix one and just follow the same directions. It's equal amounts mix and your liquid, and you microwave it, and it makes the thing for her, and she loves them.
Awesome. I'm glad I saw them in the store and I haven't bought them.
Like an Eggo waffle version, like they pre-make the waffles and freeze them and put them in the freezer section.
There we go.
And you can have them there to tell your kid, here, toast your waffle. She loves those kind of things, but now it has more protein in it.
So I just had a thought that came into my head while you were talking about Carbohydrates. I have one more comment about carbohydrates because you hit it on the head when you said loves or carbohydrates. There's a strategy that people use when you have tiny kids about serving food in the order you want it eaten in. Has anyone done that? Tried that? It is crazy. Kid doesn't like vegetables? That's all that's on their plate is the vegetables. Everybody eats their vegetables first. And then the protein comes out and everybody eats their protein. I know it seems crazy basic, but if the bread's on the table first, I do it. Pasta, same thing. If you work backwards and you introduce things in the order you want them eaten, obviously much easier done when you have a tiny kid. Sort of weird if all of a sudden your 15-year-old, you're like, you're only getting green beans until you finish them. Like, that doesn't work really either. But kind of know too that what's available is what they're gonna eat. Even if it means like you had a smaller portion of the carbohydrate and a larger portion of the things that they don't normally gravitate towards, you can always get them more carbohydrate later. But kind of, being a little bit mindful and tricky of that. And anytime you can sneak in extra protein, go for it. I promise you will not overdo it at breakfast. I promise you will not. We had some questions, yeah.
Could you talk about portion size? Like, what does 20 grams of protein look like?
So tricky, right? Because it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about meat, we're talking about palm of your hand. That's not usually what we eat. Usually, deck of cards, that's another great example. That would be for your meat or your fish source. We're talking about something like peanut butter. We're talking a few tablespoons worth. So it does matter accordingly. If you're talking about a glass of milk, you're talking somewhere between 7 and 10 grams per cup. So not a whole lot. So depending on what category we're in, depends on how much protein is going to be in that. We're talking about an egg, that's going to be a lot easier to get there than than having the cereal with milk in it that we were just talking about as far as quantity goes.
How many grams would an egg be?
7. A lot easier to get a couple eggs in. Yeah. What else do you have for questions?
Do you have an opinion or recommendation on any sort of protein drink, whether it's for kids or adults?
So, yeah. If you need protein, they're a great way to get it in. With anything, if that's what you're offering versus eating, most people would prefer to drink something than eat. That's why I'm being cautious by offering my opinion. There's a lot of options out there that have great protein sources, protein quantities, and low sugar. And that's what I would suggest you go for first. There are some brands out there that have 20 to 30 grams of protein and less than a gram of sugar in an 8-ounce container, which is pretty amazing. When you are talking about that, you obviously are talking about a whole bunch of extra stuff added in there, so you have to know what you're using it for. Now, here's an example of how I would want to use one. In the middle of a tournament. I am in the middle of a lacrosse tournament, it's 95 degrees out, and they have 45 minutes between games. I would absolutely use something like that. And then when we have a little bit longer break, maybe I would bust out the fruit, the veggies, because that's always in my bag, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, etc. So choosing how to use it, they're great as an adult after a workout for recovery. That's a great way to use it. What I could also see it being used for is you've got that kid that you've tried everything with and you cannot get them to have breakfast before they walk out the door. Your teenager, that could be an option for them too. We could dive into the type of protein. Now, obviously a whey-based protein is going to be the best as far as digestibility and readily available in your body, but there's a lot of really good options out there. When we're talking about kids, I never want to suggest something outside of food before we try food. Because food should always come first.
I read this once, a dietitian had written this. It's best to have fruit in the morning. Maybe, is there something to the way your body absorbs the vitamins or the minerals or whatever fruit is providing you?
Another tricky question, because there's a lot of different books that have been authored that go through not only timing of the whey, but also your genetic makeup and your body shape, kind of all plays a role in. My hunch or my best assessment of that would be to say, we're talking about best absorption of nutrients when we have combinations of food. So if you were to have a fruit in the morning, I would say that then you would have an opportunity for the foods you eat later in the day to help absorb those nutrients. I wouldn't say that it would have any better effect on metabolism, availability, etc., other than the opportunity for your body to absorb nutrients. Yeah.
So I know you said something earlier about whole milk, and that in some ways it might actually, if I understood you correctly, that it might actually sort of fill up a child too much a little bit. My son's a bit underweight, and he's 16, and he's an athlete, and he really, 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 really wants to gain weight. So we've been giving him whole milk, but then I notice he's not necessarily asking for seconds of his dinner, which I would like to see because he really does need to have more calories. So I guess that's my question is, should we not be giving him whole milk?
So now you're talking about the opposite side of it too.
Yeah.
So what do you do when you fill up with that? Has anyone heard as an adult, like if you were to have a glass of water before you start your dinner, you might eat less? I would say the same thing would happen in that scenario. Okay. So not letting him have the second glass of milk until he's had most of his meal. I know it's hard to tell to a 16-year-old, but also knowing too that whatever we do first fills you up first. So in that scenario, I think whole milk would be perfectly acceptable to continue to give him. Certainly could use the nutrients in there to support the growth and the development of his body. In that scenario though, if that's the case, also prioritizing what he's putting in his mouth first. So again, thinking of the most nutrient dense things in there first, because it's like that idea that if you put all the big rocks in, then we can fill in with all the little ones, but if the big rock we start with is going to be a very lackluster nutrient thing, then we're not going to have room for all the good stuff. So it's not really that helpful, that answer, but I would continue giving it to him. Just, again, in my scenario at home, we're constantly talking about hydration, and I always ask them to have a glass of water, and then all of a sudden they don't do it until it's right before dinner. I'm like, well, no, now I don't want you to have 3 glasses of water. I want you to sit down and eat. So kind of just even paying attention to that. Maybe, giving him a glass of milk like an hour before dinner. Kind of curb it a little bit, and then maybe he won't consume so much at dinner, beverage-wise, and more meal. I'm over.
Well, it's 1:15, which I could talk about this all day. I did want to say about the smoothies, and I don't know what you feel. We make smoothies at home. I make them big, and I put in all fresh berries, well, frozen because they're colder, and then I add flax and chia. We've added avocado, banana, full fat yogurt, and then I put them all in popsicles, and then they can eat those for breakfast or in between snacks. And sometimes they don't know what's in them, all the good stuff. They just taste good, so it's like my one and only treat. The only thing I make ahead, but I'm going to try to do that more.
I didn't talk about fast food at all, and I meant to do that. I just want to say, labels are out there, guys. Look on the board when you get up there and make what's the best choice for you. We go in hungry, so we want everything, including when I'm at Panera, all I'm doing is this at the cookies, right? Look on there, say, okay, I like 3 kinds of soup. Let me look what the best option is. That one's got protein in it because it's got beans in it, or it's got chicken in it. And it's a broth soup instead of a cream soup, so it's going to be a better choice for me because it's 200 calories less. Whatever it may be, there's plenty of options out there. All of the new snack wraps that McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts all have, grilled chicken or eggs with ham in it, those are great options that are nice portion sizes. Because now we're back to portion sizes. The problem becomes when we get 2 Big Macs, 2 large fries, and 2 regular sodas, and we consume them all ourselves. So knowing too that those options are all out there because people are asking for them. So they are available to you. Fast food does not have to be off the table. It just has to be conscious. Okay. Thank you guys.
This has been a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District's PTSA.